Hi, my name is Jim Nilsen of Photography Travel Tours, and today I'm going to talk to you about tripods and tripod accessories, namely the quick release plates and then ball heads. And one of the main reasons I'm talking about wanting to give you some information about tripods is that I've had quite a bit of experience with the tripod over the years. I've gone through the whole gamut of cheap tripods, mediocre tripods, and then good tripods. And you hear a lot of people say that, boy, all the money I spent on crappy tripods over the years, I wish I would have just bought one that is good and that's going to serve me. So I've certainly done that myself. And on our tours, we see a lot of tripods over the years. We've been doing our tours, I think, for 8 seasons now. And we see a lot of tripods, and we see people with a lot of good tripods, and we see a fair amount of people that have some pretty poor tripods. And we also see people with these poor tripods and also the heads that go on the tripod getting less than optimal results using them, and also spending a lot of time fumbling around, setting them up, and maybe the tripod's unstable or something's loose and so forth. So today I'm going to show you things that I've learned over the years that work really well for a tripod, and also the plates and the ball heads. And also to save weight, because we're talking about a tripod for traveling. You know, I have the tripod that's the video camera that's sitting on right now is a fairly large Gitzo tripod, which I love, but I gave up carrying it on my travels because it weighed about 1.5 pounds more than the current tripod that I'm using, which is this one right here, made by Faisal. So is a tripod your friend, or is it your enemy? And we see both. We absolutely see some people on our tours that hate tripods. Hopefully this information that I'm giving you will perhaps encourage you, if you are an enemy of tripods, to consider using one. You're definitely going to need one on one of our tours because we do a lot of low-light photography, which is really fun photography. Some of those people that have not embraced tripods have really never done much this low-light photography, and low-light photography with a digital camera is really amazing. It just opens up this whole new world of possibilities, doing 30-second exposures, even 5-minute exposures. And then certainly you can get into the astro photography too, where you're doing longer exposures, 20 or 30 seconds, or time-lapse and so forth. So why should you use a tripod? Again, low-light photography, and I will in the next segment go over some of the images that I've used a tripod for because of low light. But not only low light, there's some situations, maybe midday where it's really bright, where you want to put a neutral density on front of your lens to reduce the amount of light coming through to your camera and to your sensor, so that you can achieve a slow shutter speed to exaggerate the movement of water or clouds. I'll show you a really good example of both. Perhaps you are unsteady with your technique, and I've seen this in a few people on our tours where they just do not have the strength to hold their camera, especially if they're using a camera, a big one like a Nikon D800 series with a big 2.8 lens on it. Also a pretty important reason to use a tripod, in my opinion, at least for my type of photography, is that it really helps to slow you down and to be more intentional and thoughtful in the creation of your images. Which leads me to why not use a tripod. Well, they're a pain to carry around. Hopefully, with my advice here for reducing weight, that will not be an issue. It does inhibit spontaneity. The type of photography such as what Henri Cartier-Bresson did, photographing people on the street and so forth. The tripod just gets in your way. Really not practical. A tripod can draw attention to you. There can be some public places when we travel where you absolutely can't use them because they think that you're professional and you're going to make money off the photograph just because you're using a tripod. So those are the pros and cons for tripods, and I'll pause here and then show you some of the images that I've used and why I've had to use a tripod to get what I got with the images. So here's a classic example of the use of a tripod to exaggerate motion with water. In this case, I think the exposure was about half a second. Plitvice Lakes National Park. Tripod was absolutely necessary here. This next image was taken, this is actually an example of two different techniques. It's using a tripod and also a panorama. So a tripod was needed for both the panorama and the fact that it was about half a second exposure. We do a lot of this type of exposure, blue hour exposure, in this case Venice, where we're early morning here. It's probably a 5-second exposure. So it really opens you up to this blue hour. The next couple images here, we also have blue hour with the moon rising in Slovenia. I think this was only a couple second exposure, or it was actually half a second. I raised the ISO up because I didn't want the movement in the moon as it was rising. Another mountain church scene here taken in the Dolomites in Italy. And again, it's an early blue hour shot. It was actually a little bit before the blue hour. We look for these situations that have lit up buildings at night. Into the forest in Halabos in Belgium. It was really dark in here. And I think this was a 2-second exposure. So again, very difficult, even raising the ISO up to 400 for hand holding. Here's a great example of an image that you wouldn't believe. This was actually 245 seconds. It was really dark out. The eye could barely discern what was going on here, but as you get into doing this type of photography with a tripod, you'll soon find out this, it opens up great possibilities. So this is an example where I was talking about where you need a tripod because you're putting a neutral density filter in front of the lens, and this is a great example of that. Broad daylight, early morning, 10 o'clock in the morning. There's just a whole lot of light here, and I put a 10-stop neutral density filter on the image and was able to get a 25-second exposure. Absolutely need that tripod right here. This is an example of focus stacking shot with a 400mm lens. Even at f/16 it would be difficult to have everything in focus in this image. So everything was really still. I was using a tripod, and I took numerous images, about 12, focusing starting in the foreground, moving up all the way to the top of the frame, and then merged all 12 of those images in Photoshop to achieve maximum depth of field. This next image is also blue hour, probably about 5 seconds, but it's also demonstrating another reason to use a tripod in that there's quite a bit of depth of field requirements here from near to far, shot with a 24mm. So I had to shoot at f/16 to achieve everything in focus. Again, slower shutter speed for that. Southern Moravia, Czech Republic, using a 100 to 400 lens, and tripod is really necessary here for the most part. Mainly to stabilize things when we're hand holding, and also to help in the intentionality of the composition. So now I'm going to talk to you about what to look for when you're looking to purchase a tripod. First of all, I'm a really big proponent because of weight of the carbon fiber material, and all the tripods that I have here, there's 3 here and 1 there that the camera's on right now, are carbon fiber. And so not only weight, but they're very dampening, so for vibration and so forth. So my goal when I'm choosing a tripod for travel is that I like it to weigh less than 3 pounds for just the legs. I'm just talking about the part without the head here. This particular tripod that I'm using right now, I believe, weighs about 2.4 pounds. It's a Faisal tripod. It does weigh 2.4 pounds. So I will list the tripods that I'm actually talking about here and show you, though. There'll be a little segment on that so that you can see what the actual model number is. Another thing to look for on the tripod is when it's folded down, how many segments are there of legs. In this case, this particular tripod has 4. Some tripods will only have 3, and this particular one has 3. So the advantage of having only 3 is the tripod is going to be more stable. The less segments you have, the more stable it's going to be. And it might be a little bit taller, maybe an inch or 2 for its weight. The disadvantage is when you fold them up, they're going to be longer. And for travel, I really think it's important to be able to fit your tripod into your luggage when it's folded down, removing the head. And some of the 3-segment tripods, that might not be possible. Also, when you're carrying a 3-segment tripod around, oftentimes it's just kind of big, and it's kind of, if you put it on your backpack, it's sticking out and so forth. So I'm a big fan of the 4-segment tripods. I would not go more than 4. There are some tripods that I think are 5 or even 6, and they're probably really unstable. When you do travel and put your tripod into your luggage, if you want to do that, that's what I do. Take your ball head off and wrap it up in some clothing, or in this case, this is actually is what the tripod ball head came in. My luggage is soft luggage, so it's not very protective. Another thing to look for is the mechanism for how does the tripod collapse, whether it's a screw mechanism like this or a flip lock mechanism. I don't have any flip lock mechanism tripods because I'm not a big fan of them. I guess one advantage of the flip lock is that it's a little bit quicker. Disadvantage is that they might not be as stable, they might malfunction a little easier, go bad. So some people think that this screw mechanism is kind of a pain in the butt, but I'll show you that it's really not. One of the things to watch out for, and I see this a lot, is that when people are loosening their tripod, they go way, they really exaggerate it, they do like more than 180 degrees. You just have to simply do a little bit to loosen it like that. So you can see how fast that is if you practice this. It doesn't take long at all. It's a lot more stable. So I'm a big fan of the screw tightening mechanisms. Another thing to look for on a tripod is this thing here for independent leg angle adjustment. So this is really useful if you're on some stairs, or maybe you're on a hillside. You can adjust it up like this and down. And I think most of the tripods have that type of mechanism, at least all the ones that I've seen. It's pretty much a standard feature. Another nice thing to have on a tripod is a little hook here underneath that just screws in, and this is really helpful for hanging something on it, like you can hang your camera bag on that, or a stuff sack with some water in it or rocks, and the idea is they're there to stabilize your tripod, especially if it's windy, and especially a tripod like this, which is small. Another thing to look for, a feature that is kind of nice to have on a tripod, is a level, and this is an Enduro tripod. It has a level right there. The Feisels don't have it. I wish they did. It's kind of one of my complaints about the Feisel. And the leveling tool is a nice tool if you're doing panoramas. And some people think that as long as they have a level in their camera or in their ball head, that's all they need. But if you're really into doing panoramas, the first thing you want to do is level your tripod underneath your ball head. This is a little level that I got. It's a Sunway Photo thing, B&H, which is a brand that offers some pretty reasonably priced accessories for your tripods. And this would go on top of the tripod, and then the ball head would go on there. It's a little bit of a pain leveling it. You have to go work with each leg. It's not very fast. So another thing to think about when you are purchasing a tripod is, does the tripod have a center column or no center column? And most of the tripods you'll see out there do have a center column. And the problem with center columns is that as you raise it, it becomes a little less stable. So for me to make this tripod more comfortable for me to use, so I don't have to bend over, I'm going to have to loosen this and raise it up here. And so the higher you have this center column, the more unstable it's going to be. So my preference is a tripod that doesn't have a center column, that is a pretty good height for me, so I don't have to bend over too much. In this case I have to bend over a little bit, but it's still comfortable enough. The tripod that my the video camera is on right now is taller, and it probably comes up about here, but I don't want to carry that extra 1.5 pounds. on my travels. I'll take the bending over and save about 1.5 pounds. So that's my tripod of choice, but keep in mind, if you do buy a tripod like this that doesn't have the center column, make sure that it's not too tall for you. You definitely don't want a tripod that you have to go like this. And I've seen this. You know, I'm 6'2", so this works really well for me. So this won't work for everybody. If you're 5'2", this is probably too tall for you. And it's a pain in the ass to lower it. You want to set it up full length and have it work really well. I've seen a lot of tripods like this one on our tours. This is a Faisal tripod, and actually I own this tripod. I don't take it on my tours with me, but I use this for backpacking because it's pretty light. It weighs 1.7 pounds. And but when I am using this, I have it down low. I'm working, usually doing landscape photography, and I'm working on my knees. I carry a piece of foam so that or a pair of knee pads. But this, you can see this tripod will actually extend up like this. Okay, so I have seen people using tripods kind of like this one on our tours, and in fact maybe it's flimsier than this, and this is a very, very, very unstable position for a tripod, especially if you put something on it that is a heavier camera. It just doesn't like it. If there's any amount of wind, it's going to be vibrating around. So definitely limit your extension on your center column to no more than this. You know, ideally you'd have it a little bit lower and so forth. So this is a no-no. Don't do this. But it's great for backpacking. So I'm going to pause here, and then we'll move on to some of the accessories for your tripods. Hey, I'm back. Before I start talking about some of the accessories for the tripods, a couple things that I forgot to mention about uses. Another reason why you can, a couple reasons why you would want a tripod, and one of them would be there's a technique called focus stacking, where you're trying to achieve increased depth of field, especially with a longer lens, by focusing in numerous places from near to far in a scene, and then opening those up in Photoshop and merging them. Another would be for a lot of HDR photography, where you're trying to increase your dynamic range in a scene that has a great dynamic range. So in many situations you're going to need a tripod for that. Another thing that I forgot to mention also about an advantage to the tripods that don't have a center column. If you do a lot of macro photography where you need to get your tripod down low, the center column that these have, like here, can get in your way. So here's a tripod without a center column, so there is no center column here, and you can actually splay the legs out and bring it lower and get down really low. And another use would be, there's a really good example of a shot that we do in Provence in France at the Senonc Abbey. And it's a situation where there's a beautiful lavender field leading up to this very old abbey. But you really can't stand in front of the lavender because there is a rock wall about this high. It's kind of challenging for people that are short. In that situation, we bring a little ladder or a milk crate. But we can put our tripods, if you have a situation like this where you have no center column, you can put the tripod on top of the rock wall. And it's difficult if you have a center column. I did see somebody using it with a center column, and they kind of got really creative with the angle that they put the tripod at. I also didn't mention brands of tripods. I'll list this here. We'll have a little slide that'll show the different brands. Gitzo is perhaps one of the most popular and expensive. Great product. Really Right Stuff is even more expensive, a really good product, but I think it's a little overkill on the price. I think they're overpriced. Faisal, I use Faisal tripods. I do have a Gitzo that I'm no longer traveling with, as I mentioned. I like the Faisal tripods, medium to high price, but lightweight. Enduro, a lot of people like the Enduro tripods. They really claim that they stand up very well, and the prices are very good. maybe a little bit heavy for their class, but a very, very good choice of tripod. Mi Photo is a tripod that we see a lot of. Most of the ones I've seen are kind of small. If you're a short person, it's probably a really good bet because they're a pretty good product and a good price. I have seen some Benro tripods, and I don't know much about them. It looked like a pretty good product, but I really can't vouch for it. Sirui, S-I-R-U-I, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. I've seen a lot of those. They seem to be very good legs. They're popular. And I'm not sure about the ones that are taller. I think they're a little bit heavy. Manfrotto Vanguard has seen these tripods. I don't like these tripods at all. I'm not a big fan of them. A lot of the camera stores will try to sell you on these. And by the way, I'm a big fan of ordering from B&H because they have the 30-day return policy as long as it's in good shape. So you can really try it out in your living room. There is a particular tripod that we saw two of this year, two of the same model, this is 2018, two separate tours, and it was a product by the name of Three-Legged Thing. In this particular model, I don't know the name of it, I'll show a picture of it, it was really a piece of crap. In fact, it was so bad that one of our clients decided to leave it in Europe and not even bring it home. It was heavy, it was expensive, it was terrible to set up, it fell apart, so I think a general rule is maybe stay away from the three-legged thing. That's just my humble opinion, but yeah, it wasn't just me, it was the two other people that had those tripods on the tour. So ball heads, let's talk about ball heads right now, and I definitely do recommend a ball head, and I've seen a lot of different types of heads on tripods. Ball head is a lot simpler, it's more compact, I find it more useful. I've seen these different types of heads that squeeze and other ones that have cranks and so forth. I've been using a ball head for over 20 years, and I've used quite a few different brands. I am now using the Really Right Stuff ball head. Magritte has one, I have one. This is the BH40. It's good if you're using a lens like the 100 to 400. Magritte gets by with a BH30, which is smaller and lighter. Her biggest lens is a 70 to 200 f4 Canon. I love this ball head. The last one I had was a Acrotech, which was pretty good ball head. I like these a lot better. I'll probably have this for the rest of my life, as long as I don't lose it or drop it off a cliff or something. Make sure that, in my opinion, if you do get a ball head, that it has this little knob for rotation. If you're into doing panoramas, it's very useful. Even if you don't do panoramas, it's nice to be able to rotate it like that. A couple of things. One of the things on the ball head is the type of clamp that you get with it. Most of the ball head products that I see out there have this kind of clamp on it, which is a screw type mechanism. This is one of my older clamps from a Really Right Stuff ball head. This particular attachment clamp has this lever here, so I highly recommend the lever mechanism versus the screw type mechanism, and a couple reasons. The main reason is it's really quick, and the second reason is it's foolproof. There have been situations where people have thought that they had it screwed in, me included, and they put the tripod over the shoulder, and the camera falls from this distance. I did that one time. But just look and see, look how quick that is. I've seen people on our tours without this mechanism, and it takes them forever to put their camera on top of their tripod. So, big fan of the Really Right Stuff. They're expensive, but you will probably thank yourself for investing in this. A lot of the tripod companies will offer you a package that has the legs and the head, like Faisal has that, I think Enduro, and they're probably pretty good, but most of them don't have the lever on them, so I really think the Really Right Stuff ball heads are a pretty good way to go, or the best way to go. Another thing to look for in a ball head, or not the ball head, but the plates, And these are the things that go onto your body. They screw into the tripod threads. You could simply get a plate such as this that screws in to there. It's made specifically for a specific camera. It's pretty important because you want to be able to have access to your batteries and so forth. We are a big fan of the L bracket plates. And by the way, I should mention that we're a big fan of the Arca Swiss type compatible plates. And Arca Swiss is a company that came up with this design, the way it's shaped and so forth. And the magic of the Arca Swiss is that it is so secure and it's so fast. Another advantage is, say that we have a situation on a tour that we do in the Czech Republic, in Prague, where we are in a tower and there's only room for one tripod. If you have an Arca type compatible plate, and it doesn't have to be Arca Swiss or Wheelerite stuff, it can be Faisal or Kirk, there's different brands. As long as it's the Arca type, it'll fit in here. So let's say there's a group of us, there's 5 of us, one person gets done, the other person comes in, tripod stays in the same spot. So that's another advantage. The big advantage is it just works so much better. It's so superior to every other product that I've seen. So advantage of the L bracket. Well, here's a situation. It's mainly from going from the horizontal to the vertical mode. So here's a situation if you didn't have the L bracket on there. Let's just say that it was a regular bracket. You want to go into the vertical mode. Well, you can see right now it's not quite vertical. I have to bring the leg down a little bit to get it, and I have to adjust it, right? Plus, it's not very stable when you whack the ball head over like this. We've actually saw a person on one of our tours that had a really heavy camera, a Nikon camera, with a heavy lens and a very, very inferior tripod. And she did this and wasn't paying attention. The wind blew it over. It was so unstable. So the simple thing to do is to get an L bracket, and you want to go into the vertical mode. It's as quick as that. It's much more stable. Plus, if you're into doing panoramas, most of the people suggest, including myself, that you want to use the vertical mode for panoramas. You're over the center of the tripod, so as you rotate, it's rotating around the center, and it's much more easy to stitch your images from that position. And what else we got here? Some of the brands that we suggest for the L brackets would be Kirk. I have a Kirk that's right there on the camera shooting the video. Wheelerite Stuff, which is here with Magritte's camera. There's a company called Sunway Photo that makes a really good knockoff of some of these products, and then Pro Media Gear is another company. So if you're not sure about your specific camera body, Google it and say L bracket for Canon, whatever, 5DR, because you want to make sure that the bracket is made for your particular body, so you have access to the battery and also the slots on the side for your SD or compact flash card or your cable release. Another thing that's very useful if you're using a big lens, like I have the Sony 100 to 400, is to put and if your lens has a tripod collar, which this one does, you can get a Arca Swiss type plate. In this case, it was a very simple plate that I bought, a generic one that was $10, but it works quite well. And simply mount it that way. You wouldn't want to mount the it to the tripod here in the body, because there would be so much weight subjected to the mount area of the body if you did that. So, and a lot of people that have a bigger lens like this with a tripod collar, they don't realize that the tripod collar actually is able to rotate. And so to go from the horizontal to the vertical mode, it's just like that. So it's kind of fun to see the reaction on that particular person's face when they see how easy that is, instead of having to whack it over like that or use the L bracket. And it's kind of a eureka moment. Yeah, so That's pretty much it. I probably left a few things out, but that's the main. These are the main topics. So one thing's for sure, that if you do buy a tripod and bring it with you, and more importantly, use a tripod, overall you're going to get better images. And so we're big fans of them, and we hope that you use a tripod for these low light situations. You're going to get sharper images, and they're just a really great, useful tool for photography. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email me, give me a call about any of this stuff, or any of the stuff that I haven't covered. Maybe you have something that I can add to the next video. Thanks for watching.